some of the session, I think when we present our images, it may be worthwhile to stand. At least I will. You can choose how you like. How will we do the images? Now, I have images loaded up there. How will I be able to click through them? The person who loaded them has not.
Yes. No, he's there.
Oh, so you,
yes.
when I tell you, you click. Okay, wonderful. So welcome. It's a very interesting session. I feel privileged to be here. This is my second time at the Dibrugarh International Literature, Dibrugarh University International Literature Festival. I loved it last time. I'm a little unusual. I come from the west coast of India, from Goa, India's smallest state, very far away. Last time I was here, I learned that Vietnam, where one of the delegates was from, is 1,000 kilometers closer to you than Goa is. So it gives you a sense of how far I come from. But I have been deeply committed and love Assam and the Brahmaputra Valley and what comes out, the hills that rise from here. And over many years I spent a lot of time here. I have come back again and again, and this location is always in mind. So one of the things we have, and that's one of the reasons why I feel very privileged to be on the stage with KANATO and Joy particularly, whose books I have read. Thomas is new to me, very impressed by you, sir, of course. But KANATO and Joy have helped me a lot in understanding what it's like to belong to this region and the choices, the negotiations we make in belonging to India, which is obviously a vast and complex country. So one of the things we have today is we're going to try and craft it. They have beautiful books. I urge you to read both books. KANATO's book is, of course, more about Nagaland, and Joy has a couple, but the book I adore is called Being Mizo. It's about belonging in this region. But so we're going to, because their work is more in books and perhaps less in the photographic vein, we're going to try and track a story for you. Okay, and that story is the tryst with photography that that we Indians are still engaged in. Now, who over here in the audience does not have Instagram? Zero. Oh, one. Except for you. You are not my target audience, sir. So, you don't, right? The interesting thing about photography is how it's exploded. Today, this is not a statistic I've made up. I spent some time thinking about it. Today on the Dibrugarh campus, probably more photographs will be taken than were taken in India before 1947. Right? That's just on the Dibrugarh campus today. Right? So we have, when we talk about putting us, why are you taking photographs? If I turned around and asked you why you're taking photographs, you're putting yourself in the story, right? You see something out, you're representing yourself, but a lot of the time the camera's coming on yourself. You're telling a story. How do you relate to your environment? Who are you? You're writing yourself into the story with the lens, right? So that is really the story of photography in general. That's what photography has represented. Okay, so I want to track a little bit back to the 19th century. Okay, so photography as a relatively accessible medium comes about in about 1839. Okay, 1839. Imagine where the world is at that time. I think in 1838, if I'm not mistaken, Upper Assam, where you are now, is when the British arrived here. Okay. But 1839, photography is a commonly available, becomes a more popularly available mechanism, right? 1839, 1840 is also the end of the Industrial Revolution in the UK. So you have a people who have gone through the Industrial Revolution, that is, if you like, the colonials, let's call them loosely here, who are encountering Upper Assam at this time. And they have the Industrial Revolution behind them, they have the camera behind them. And so the first photographs that you will find, I actually don't know what those first photographs are, but you're going to be talking about it from different perspectives. Those first photographs describe a very unequal relationship. One person has the, industrial, quote-unquote, civilization behind them and all the technology, and the other peoples who are here are effectively encountering, being absorbed into a global cycle, what we would now call globalization. It took place then too. These peoples, the peoples of the Upper Assam Valley, the peoples of the hills around here, are encountering the modern world all at the same time. So that's the birth of photography. happens at exactly that moment when Upper Assam comes on the map, right? So what happens then? Now if you look in Wikipedia, which I happen to do today, history of photography, they put it bluntly, badly, crudely. They say British brought photography to India in 1840, right? But actually the story is much more complicated than that. When you say brought by the British, it's a kind of a canard. It is a kind of racist, orientalist, uncomprehending history of what actually happened. Because, like, who brought you the mobile phone? Is it fair to say Americans brought you the mobile phone or the Chinese brought you the mobile phone? No. This is the available technology that you went and you bought, right? So let's understand it in that sense. When the technology arrived, emerged in 1840 or so, within a year there were advertisements in the Bombay newspapers, in the Calcutta newspapers saying, do you want to get this technology? Would you like to buy it? The first significant group of photographers that takes place, grouping of photographers as photographers, takes place in 1854. Okay? And in 1854 it's called the Photographic Society of Bombay. And it begins with 200 members. Okay? One of those 200 members, actually there are several of them, but one of those 200 members we're going to talk about today a little bit. He comes from my part of India, which is Goa. So now when we talk about the Upper Assam Valley meeting the world, starting the process of globalization in, let's say, 1840, when it becomes part of the British Empire, what happens on the west coast of India is maybe 1,000 years, potentially even 2,000 years earlier, because the Arabian Sea, where my state faces out, is one of the most heavily trafficked parts of in antiquity, in history. As far as you go back in human history, Malabar coastline and Western coastline are always mentioned. The Sumerians, the Etruscans, the Romans, the Chinese, you name it. It has been encountering the world since then. So these people, the colonial relationship in Goa started in 1510. So we're talking about 1840 and we're talking about 1510, right? Certainly by the 19th century, there was a very assertive kind of native world citizen who was coming out of places like Goa and to some extent Bombay. So what are the people we're going to talk about? Please first slide. Who's there? Who's looking at it? Someone is supposed to be looking at the slides? Do you have my slide? Oh, okay, perfect. Great. First, 101. Okay? This is one of the first photographs taken in India. So this is actually in 1855, 1857, something like that. This is taken by Narayan Daji. Narayan Daji Lad is a Goan who goes to the Grant Medical College. When Grant Medical, so Western colonial, you are studying in a Western form in a way over here. Western education came to India with colleges like the Grant Medical College in Bombay. Narayan Daji Lad was in the second class. His brother Bhav Daji Lad was in the first class of this. So Narayan Daji Lad was a doctor from Goa who was very successful and prosperous in Bombay. And these people were establishing a new way to be Indian as kind of equals. In the modern era, these people were pushing the color bar, pushing colonialism to accommodate people who are assertive, people who consider themselves to be equals. And you can immediately see that. I did not bring you colonial photographs to show, but you're going to see some colonial photographs, I hope. You'll see what the gaze is, the colonial gaze, the colonial photographer photographs a subject. He photographs something, people that he thinks he's above. He photographs someone who he dominates. His photographs tell a story, and the story is that if the quote-unquote white people are in one place and the other people are in another place. Daji Lad is not doing that. Over here, you'll rarely find a photograph in the 19th century taken in that period where the Tongawala, or in this case the bullock cart operator is an Indian, but the guy he's carrying is also an Indian, right? Normally you'll see some colonial over there. You have these amazing photographs, horrible photographs also from here of a giant, portly British person being carried by a small Khasi woman up to Shillong, right? That's the kind of image. Juxtapose that image to what Daji Dalla is doing here. This is not just an image taken by Gaji. There are two or three things. He's not taking it for, it's not a colonial project. He's not doing it for money. He's expressing himself. He's writing himself into history. But these photographs are not isolated. Where is this photograph? This photograph is part of King Charles's collection in the UK. This photograph was commissioned and put into an album by Prince Albert, that is the consort of Victoria. So Victoria was collecting this image by a Goan photographer of a Goan subject or Maharashtrian subject possibly over here. And so we're talking about already, the moment this tool came into the hands of the Indians, they were using it in ways that the colonials did not use it either. Use it and also writing a different story for themselves. There's a different relationship between the photographer and the subject. Next slide, please. This is another photo. Is it possible to zoom in at all?
Yeah, you can expand it.
Yes. This is a lovely technology, by the way. Congratulations to Dibrugarh University. So these are the Vallabhachaya Maharajas. But look at this gentleman over here. Look at that. Do you think if it was a British photographer, he'd be smiling like that? You know, in 1860? He would not. He would not be smiling like that. He's smiling because he knows the photographer. Right? The photographer is Narayan Daji. There's a different relationship happening here. Right? So this is the birth, already at the birth of photography in India. Indians are using it in ways to describe themselves, to define themselves, to take control of the way that they're being represented. So this story now switches to, how do I zoom in?
Yeah, only he can zoom. He'll be able to zoom.
Can you zoom in? Make it bigger? Okay. So now I'm going to bring you back. Narayan Daji came from Goa and studied in Bombay, right? I'm going to take the story back to Goa now, because something unique is happening. At the same time that, if you like, Assam is being, in a way, I don't know what the word is, but Assam is being controlled. Assam is coming suppressed in a way. There is a new identity being created for Assam. Your tea gardens are coming. Millions of people are being brought here. They're very much subjects. The Assamese at this time are very much subjects of a colonial project. Something different is happening on the west coast, where in Goa, due to accidents in history, the Portuguese are weak. They're not able to kind of keep the control that they would have liked in their own colonial state. So, but the British will not invade them because they have a very old old treaty in Europe. So what happens in Goa is you have this kind of assertive population, like the Narayan Dajis, also in Goa. So this is the center of Panjim where I live, and these guys are taking the technology and now taking it outside Goa as well. So this is actually taken in Goa, but the next slide is from 1890. So the first photographers, this brings us back in a beautiful way to the theme of your festival here, which is Africa. The first photographers to enter East Africa and then also West Africa, commercial photographers, were all from Goa. So again, they names like Gomes, Coutinho, Carvalho. If you look at the archive of photographs being created at that time, you have two. You have the British creating a whole set of images, again of their subjects, and then you have these photographers who are dealing with their clients. This is a photograph from 1890 in the colonial period. Do you look at the easy relationship, look at the way that she's sitting, look at the easy relationship between herself and the photographer. Look at the way that she's projecting herself, right? This is in a very profound way using the lens to write yourself a different story, right? She's present. I'm going to end with one more.
But Chief, at the time, Goa was under Portuguese rule.
Sure.
So it's a different lens that they're looking through.
No, the difference in the Portuguese rule and the British, Indians under British rule, was that the Portuguese lacked the power to do anything but negotiate with the Goan elite. So everything was by concession. In many ways, the Goans ruled their own colonial state from the 19th century onward, which is horrifying to the British. And in a way, it's also horrifying to the Indians who absorbed the British frame. So this is a photograph I particularly love. Can you zoom in, please? This is 1900, right? So this photograph turns on your head so many things that you're supposed to believe about the times. You know, who is about the relationship between between peoples, between power and the supposed powerless and the supposed powerful. I love it very much because it brings us into 1900, and you're seeing here a complicity between the photographer and the subject, where we are creating a document to write ourselves into the history in a way that even the history books today struggle to define this. What is this happening here exactly? It's a little contradictory to the stereotypes we have. So, what I want to say is basically the history of Indian photography continued. There are two sets, right? There's the colonials using photography, and it's the Indians using photography. The history that we tend to learn is of the colonial mode of photography. It goes into something like Raja Deen Dayal. But here you see agency coming onto the other side, and this brings us now to the stories that I would like to hear from KANATO and Joy, and then to the 21st century and what a contemporary Indian is doing. So I hope you like those photographs. I can tell you more about them. KANATO.
This is sorry to interrupt. Technology is
This is glass. This one is glass. But it started with daguerreotype actually in India.
Yeah, so, good morning everyone. Thanks to you for such a wonderful opportunity. I'm very privileged to be sharing this panel with a remarkably accomplished bunch of scholars and artists here. So what I will be doing this morning is just a part of my research that I've been carrying out, writing a biography of this one very interesting man called PACHUAU.
Can everyone hear him in the back? Can you hear him in the back? Yes?
So, Vivek and I, we just had a discussion yesterday about the Northeast and Konkan Coast. And Vivek just told me something very interesting. He said that for Northeast, the problem is tyranny of distance. And then he said that the problem with the Konkan Coast is the tyranny of closeness, you know. And then we were also having a conversation about how for his part of the world, they make an appearance into the world maybe about 1,000 years before us, you know. And especially for ethnic communities like the Nagas and the Mizo's, it's about, procedure, I think it's about 100 years or so that we actually made an appearance in the colonial imagination and perhaps in the perception of the world. So what I will be doing this morning is, these are like, I'm a very poor photographer. Terrible, you know, my sister never allows me to take even Instagram photos. That's how bad I am. In fact, I'm from anthropology, so we did something called visual anthropology. So it's just basically about the poetics and politics of ethnography and how ethnography and the visual images and the documentaries and go hand in hand, which I'm not going to be doing. So rather, the photographs that I've been collecting so far these are like photographs of photographs, you know. And these are like rather sourced from very unkempt museums and, you know, poorly maintained museums in Nagaland, where you'll see just photographs.
Where is this from, for instance? Where is this from?
This one. This is from a mission center. Yeah, this is from a mission center. That is the mission center in Mokokchung, among the Ao Nagas. So what you see here is what I'm going to be doing is talk a little bit about how the identity is changing. You know, Nagas are making an appearance into the world, and we see how the identity is changing. You know, and also so far, I think the understanding of colonial photography is how the subjects are being represented or how the subjects are portrayed. But in my research, what I'm trying to do is, I'm just trying to turn the table, Vivek. So what I'm trying to do is, like, through the photographs, I'm trying to see the bigger interconnections. Not just the subjects, but the bigger geopolitics, the bigger history, the underlying, you know, cultural interactions. That is something that I'm trying to really understand through these photographs. Do you see anything controversial? These are Naga children, okay? It's taken somewhere 1898. This is from Impu Mission Center. So, do you see anything strange about the Nagas? What comes to your mind when you see the Nagas? They're wearing dhotis, right? Yes, they're wearing dhotis. 1898. This photograph is still controversial today. because this whole debate about who Nagas are, how Nagas should be represented, or this question of culture loss. So in fact, in many of my talks, whenever I show this picture, there's been a debate especially from the right wing of the political spectrum, saying that this is how Nagas have lost culture because of the missionary influence, So this is something that you see. So the first, if you go to Wikipedia, the first photograph of the Nagas taken was in 1870, somewhere 1870. So it's already in the. So that is a very different kind of a picture that you will see about bunch of savages, long hair, warriors. That is something that you see. But you see that slowly with the coming of the American missionaries, how things are changing, how the Naga identity, or how how Nagas are actually entering into the bigger Indian politics, or the rather Indian making of.
Do you have a reason why they were compelled to wear dhoti? The missionaries compelled them to wear dhoti.
Oh, could you just make it enlarge this one? Okay, so this is a debate, because even among the missionaries, can I just? Okay, hang on.
Yeah.
Could you just expand?
Just expand it
Yeah.
below. The scroll, the right corner from 66 to 100.
This one?
That one, the plus. Please press the
Yes.
plus on the top.
Let's also, if we don't mind, let's take questions at the end, because this will interrupt the flow.
Okay.
Okay, if you don't mind, thank you.
Yeah, so this actually portrays the controversy among the missionaries, because some missionaries were of the opinion that the natives should be in the native dress, while some missionaries were of the opinion that if they have converted, they should start wearing the dress of the Englishman, or this is an Assamese dress, because Impur is not very far from Sibsagar. So you have this influence of Sibsagar coming in. Could you just expand the photos, please? If there's touch screen. Yeah, can you touch? Is it touch screen possible?
No, it's not.
Yes, yes.
Yes.
Yes, you can touch.
So this is taken somewhere. You just see how the transition is happening. This is before the Naga Labor Corps left for France. So this is actually the starting of the modern identity. Those of you who are aware of Northeast India's history or Naga history, we talk about the Naga Club, right? How this modern identity consciousness is happening. What you see the difference is, it was quite fascinating. I took this from the Nagaland State Archives. You see the difference here, 1917, taken somewhere in Kohima. And this is in France. Can you see this?
I've seen that before. Wow.
Yeah. I think they're in what you call as a trench coat, So this quite rapid transformation that you see actually happening among the Nagas, and that you actually get to see. For me this was quite interesting, because we always thought that maybe this is basically what every Nagas thought, that when they went to France, that is the idea in our folk tales. They were in a warrior attire, and then how they were just being Nagas themselves. But you see a totally different image that we see of the Nagas wearing perhaps a very different attire. Quickly, just to run through this. This is, how many of you have been to Kohima? Yes, just see Kohima. Okay, this was taken sometime in 1940, I'm told. Okay, I got this from Kohima.
Wow.
This is Kohima village. Just see the ravages of the Second World War. The entire village was bombed, So in fact, what you see is this. Yes, this is a town. Okay, this town has really shaped the idea of Naga nationalism. I think this town has really shaped the idea of Naga identity, because you have schools here, you have all the modern amenities here. This really transformed the way we see the world. In fact, the last deputy commissioner of Naga Hills, just in connection to this photo, I want to say, the last deputy commissioner of Naga Hills was Charles Pause. So I was just going through the archives. Charles Pause said that the first casualty of the Second World War is Naga honesty. Because you see the war reparation has to be done, and how Nagas were falsely claiming, compensation, that my house was burned, my house was bombed, 1963 inauguration. So you see this is in Kohima, how, the Naga tribes waiting to receive the President Sri Radhakrishna, no? Dr. Radhakrishna. Completely, I mean, like, just this is quite totally picture we see of Kohima. I mean, this is quite interesting. I mean, many Nagas would claim that this is where the actual Indianization of the Nagas began, you know. So that this is about, you know, Nagas becoming constitutionally, you know, politically becoming part of the larger Indian society. Talks a lot about, this picture talks a lot about, I mean, that's exactly what I want to say. This picture talks a lot about the sufferings of the Naga women during the insurgency. So this was taken 1 year before the ceasefire. Ceasefire came into effect in 1997. So that is, I think this is the last peace procession that that was organized by the Baptist mission. This little bit photographs about how you see this whole transition of the identity happening, how Nagas are actually making an appearance in Kudu. So you see this appearance of the Nagas, or rather the twist with modernity. So one thing that I observed while, you know, so how I got my photographs is this. If you actually see most of the books that is published from Nagaland, you see, okay, like there's a text and then you see photograph just haphazardly put up, you know, just showing that this is taken from there. But one thing that I observed, or rather that I'm trying to actually do through these pictures, photos in my upcoming book is that I think photographs tells a lot about people's story. Not the photographs, but you actually get to know how the photographs were taken. For instance, you know, some of these photographs which I got, you know, from a village. They say that like many of the photographs were burned during the Indian military operation. So that how they are able to connect photographs, how they are able to connect the loss of memory with the Naga insurgency. So I think this is something quite fascinating. You also get to see not necessarily the photographs, but one thing that is quite interesting and fascinating about people keeping photos is that, you know, behind the photographs, there is lots of stories. I mean, I've been trying to get access, Professor Joe, I'm trying to get access to Piso's family photographs, and they're not willing to show. I mean, like, they have good collection of photographs, but for political reasons, they think that I'm a Sumi Naga, they are Angami Nagas, and they said, how dare a Sumi Naga get hold of something, you know, so precious as something that belongs to an Angami Naga. So even within the photographs, even within the collection of photographs, there is a question of tribalism, there's a question of ethnic differences that is turning up, saying that who should tell the story, who should tell the Naga story? Whether it is an Angami who should tell the Naga story, or whether it is a Sumi Naga who should tell the Naga story. A lot of things I think that has happened, that is happening under the scene. So one thing, perhaps this section Vivek should, through the digging up the archival photos, is that maybe we should see photographs not just as photographs, as something beautiful, aesthetic, you know, beautiful lighting that can be just pasted and put in the book and then everybody can appreciate. But one thing that we can take away perhaps from, at least from my short talk, is that try to unravel the stories behind the photographs. The politics of, you know, how they keep photographs, what are the memories, or how these photographs were sourced. So that is something actually I'm trying to dig up, really helping me. Because I'm writing about a man who is no longer 30, almost, yeah, I think about 30 years, 35 years gone. They're trying to dig up, but I think these photographs have been really helping me to connect the dots, writing about his life. Because when you take the photographs, people have interesting stories to tell. I mean, for some reasons, I'm not showing the photographs of Ezek Piso, but the children have shown me photographs that were taken in 1941 Rangoon. Wow. Of Piso, gentleman, young-looking Piso, you know. I mean, it tells a lot about, and they have memories to say, oh, that these photographs were taken when the Japanese came, or they say that these photographs were taken when we were about to embark back to the Naga Hills. Lots of stories. So, as I just repeat again, I reiterate myself, is that the photographs necessarily need not be just a medium of showing something or a visual representation, but I think what is more important for somebody like me working on creative non-fiction is perhaps the stories, the life stories of the photographs. I think that really matters. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Kanato. Super riveting. You guys at Dibrugarh University are really lucky to have someone like Kanato working in the way he is. I love the fact that very few academics will say that he's working on creative non-fiction. Mostly they have different kinds of ambitions. But that was amazing. Photos more than photos, I'm going to pause for a second here. I think it's very important. One of the things that we deal with, so I come from, as I said, a very heavily trafficked part of the world. But one of the problems of coming from a heavily trafficked part of the world is that everyone's written their histories, right? When my parents were born, the Portuguese had a statement at this time, who had been Portuguese for over 400 years. Aqui é Portugal. This is Portugal. The idea, it was debated robustly at the United Nations. How can you even call these people Indians? Like they were Portuguese long before India existed, in a way, right? Modern India, it's an absurdity. By that time, many Goans had become Portuguese leaders. Actually, the recent Portuguese Prime Minister, Antonio Costa, one of good friends of Narendra Modi, is a Goan. He had 2 more Goans in his cabinet. Currently, he is the head of the European Union. The head European is a Goan. The head European is an overseas citizen of India. There are 3 Goan women in the UK Parliament. I could go on. But the point is that all these stories have been told to us, but if you're someone like myself, and I can sense this very clearly in our co-panelists, some of our co-panelists, the existing stories are insufficient. They are unpersuasive. So if you go back into the history books, as I was forced to, I have 2 degrees in history, I read all the history books, I was unsatisfied with the stories I was being told, one from the Portuguese side, and then B from the new nationalist histories that were written after that. They fail to understand, fail to represent my reality. So we turn to other resources, we turn to art, we turn to architecture. In my case, I often turn to food. The food tells you very complex stories. I always go to the market. I went to every vegetable seller in Dibrugarh yesterday to see what's on sale there. It tells all kinds of really, really interesting stories, right? Things that may appear to be a contradiction gets resolved on the palette. And that's why the importance of photographs, which brings us to Joy's amazing work. Please, Joy.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you very much, Vivek, for the introduction, and also thank you to the festival for inviting me here. This is my first visit to Dibrugarh, and I've had a wonderful time so far, and I'm sure the next few days are also going to be extremely intellectually challenging as well as fun. Today, as you know, this is a book that I'm going to be talking about. This book that Willem van Skendel and I wrote. It was published in 2015. And when I started off with this book, the first thing that, the reason I decided to work on this book was because visually, as far as the Northeast is concerned, the Nagas are the most prominent. I think everyone will agree with me here. But the Nagas are most prominent as far as their visual representation is concerned. And I was quite intrigued by the fact that Mizos are nowhere represented. And I think you'll agree with me, right? And I'm talking to a Northeast crowd where you don't have to say Nagaland, this is Mizoram, and this and that, so I wouldn't get into that. But we all know that the Nagas are sort of the visual spokespersons for the Northeast in many ways. And so I went to thinking about why are the Mizos not represented at all in our culture, in our society, whenever the Northeast is spoken about. And there were several reasons, of course, and one is, of course, that the Troubles, the period of the insurgency in Mizoram, saw to it that many of our photographs and artifacts were destroyed because of the grouping of villages, because of the bombing of Aizawl, and all of that. A lot of material culture was destroyed during that period of time. But secondly, of course, is that There were very few anthropologists who came into the region and who tried. And perhaps our material culture is not as vibrant as that in Nagaland. And so there was not a heavy sort of flooding of the region by anthropologists or even colonial ethnographers who were not very, I mean there were some but not as heavily sort of addressed by ethnographers. So those were the two reasons, and therefore I went on this hunt for photographs, and it was a project sponsored by the UGC, and went collecting photographs for about 2 to 3 years, collecting photographs. So most of our photographs were from archives, of course, in England, in India, Wales, and all these places. But we went hunting for family photographs, and in order to do that, we visited the length and breadth of Mizoram, some parts of Manipur, Tripura, and we just went into villages and households and said, can you show us your family albums? And they were very willing to show us their family albums, and we just took pictures of those photographs. So we have a wide-ranging sort of selection of photographs from archives as well as family albums, and we have about 17,000 images. Okay? So, but these 17,000 images, I must say, are they are doubles, pictures taken twice and thrice and things like that. So, but overall 17,000 photographs. And then we found that these pictures were telling us a different kind of story, and that is what we wanted to talk about. And we all know that colonialism came into the region from the 1820s onwards. The Treaty of Yandabo, I think, is something that we all know about. And then slowly the entire northeast comes under the sway of the British, right? And in Mizoram, the British come into the region around 1890s, a little later than Nagaland. But by the 1890s, you have the British entering the region. And of course, the Lushai Hills, as it was not known then, was not completely, I mean, this is a very interesting aspect of colonialism in the Northeast that we don't really pay attention to, which is that different parts of the Northeast come under the sway of colonialism at different points of time, so much so that parts of Arunachal were never part of the British administration. Some parts of the Lushai Hills were part of the administration for only 30 years, like in South Mizoram. And so different, I think this, in our writing of history also, sometimes we give this wide sweep and say colonialism. But you realize that only some parts experience colonialism only for 20 years, 30 years. So this is something that we really need, kind of an aspect that we need to sort of, anyway, that's a different point, but let me come to the pictures now. So 2 or 3 things that we need to talk about. Why I bring in with colonialism is because this is the beginnings of the Mizo engagement with modernity, let's put it that way. The Mizo, and how so the pictures are trying to tell us how, so I'm a historian, as I mentioned, and one of the things that historians do is look at sort of textual sources usually. And the textual sources tell us a different story. But then we realize that when we take photographs into consideration, as Vivek was also mentioning earlier, is that these textual sources, these photographic sources, tell a very different kind of story than the one that we hear from formal textbooks. And that is something that we wanted to show. And one of the things that is very prominent is that Mizos engage with modernity in a very different way from perhaps what the rest of the country thinks about the region. Okay? And one of the things that we know is that the Northeast, when we talk about it, is usually ideas of primitiveness, savageness. All of that is something that isolation. One of the things that we talk about also is this isolation, and remote corner, isolationist. All those are the kind of ways in which we understand this particular region. So we found that these photographs tell a very different story, and how this self-fashioning takes place in a very different way. So these images are very useful in telling us a different aspect of the history of the region. Okay, so if we go to the next slide, the book is divided into, I think, if I remember correctly, 3 parts. And the first part is, of course, talking about how colonialism enters the region and the kind of photographs that were taken by photographs and images that were taken by colonial officers. And then the second part talks about how Mizoram is trying to engage with the new India. So this is after the independence. And the third part, I think, is talking about how Mizoram is fighting for independence from the 60s onwards. Okay, so so the images that we see, I'll go on to explain all of that. So one of the things that I find really interesting, this is a watercolor by one of the early officials during their trip, during the sort of expeditions to the Lashai Hills, is that in this image, we often talk about the naked tribal, right? But then you see from all these images that the earliest images are always of clothed people. It's quite interesting, okay? So the nakedness has actually sometimes been invented more by the colonialists than the people themselves. This is something that we need to bear, because there's a very interesting photograph in a book done by Alvin von Stockhausen, where Führer Heimendorf is taking a picture of a naked Naga. But there was a German anthropologist at that point of time who took a picture of Führer Heimendorf taking a picture of a naked Naga, but he was asking her to undress so that her top could be bare. Okay, so there are these images. So one of the things that we find here is, of course, of people who are clothed, and the earliest images that we see. Next slide, please. Then, of course, this is another image that was taken by Woodthorpe on one of the chiefs, the shrine of one of them. And I mean, what we wanted to show in this book was talking about how religion gets transformed. So this is another image of a shrine and a memorial stone of one of the great chiefs of the Mizos. When the British reached this place, this village, they found that he was already dead, and there was this shrine with the heads of Mithans. And if you look at if you zoom into that little tray up there in the front, there's actually the feet of a person there. So I don't know what that really represents, but a foot rather.
Yes.
Yeah. So that is, so it must have been one of these sacrifices that were offered or something like that. Next slide. These are some of the early images. You know, in Mizoram, because of Christianity and because of, you find that all these images are, I mean, you do not get to see them anymore. Like I went to Arunachal Pradesh a few days, I mean, I was there last week, and we find that there is also in Arunachal a syncretism, right, between traditional religion and Hinduism that is taking place. And in the case of the Mizoram context, these are the only images, or I mean, you do not get to see these things anymore today. Okay, so this is a prayer house, and of course that was an attempt by Woodthorpe again to sort of draw this particular image and in a color format. So the other thing, the other reason that I took on this project, which I just remembered right now, which I must say, is that many students, when they talk about the history of the Mizos, they do not have any visual representation of their past. You know, I go to a museum in Aizawl, and they'll say, this is a Mizo dress from the 12th century. Okay, and it is a modern Mizo dress. You know, the pawns that people wear, the pawnsets that people wear, and it's from the, so you realize that there is something that is going wrong a lot that is going wrong. If you're trying to present a traditional dress, that is a very modern day sort of creation, and you're attributing it to the 12th century. Okay, so this is one of the reasons that I wanted to sort of bring out these photographs. Next. So in this section that talks about the early modernity arriving into the region, of course, the memorial stone in eastern Mizoram, and then of course that is in the 1890s missionaries come, and then of course education comes in, and Christianity comes in, literacy comes in, modern literacy comes in, and of course that is a picture of the first church that was planted there in 1894. Okay, next week, I think I've got lots of things, I better go quickly. These are, so I come to this particular section on how when the Mizos take on pictures, where are they taking pictures? Okay, usually ethnographers would take sort of cultural pictures of an individual, for instance, in traditional clothing and things like that. But when the camera is held by the same local person, how does that person engage with, what kind of pictures do they take? Okay, like Vivek was talking about that earlier. And you find that in the 1930s, I'm not sure of who the first Mizo photographer was and things like that. I don't know whether I have a picture, but there is a picture of somebody who's supposed to be the first Mizo photographer. But by the 20s and 30s and all that, Mizos are beginning to take pictures of themselves. And one of the things that is quite interesting is that most of the pictures are around graves and tombstones. Okay, so family gatherings around tombstones, family gatherings around coffins, for instance, become a very, very important sort of picture. Until today, you find that for Mizos, I think among Nagas also, photographs at the time of funeral is very, very important. And it's done in a very systematic manner, you know. There's a whole list of who's going to take a picture with a coffin, and you have to go and stand there, sit next to the coffin with the family member and take photographs. Okay, so since then, these pictures around, next image, I think, yeah, so this is another image that is taken around a coffin in 1955. So the images that come are from, pictures taken around these coffins. Next. And of course, another image that we see is like, what do you call these pictures? Like when school passing or graduation pictures, and so this is another occasion, and of course Christmas is another occasion from where you begin to get a lot of these images that are coming out in the 1950s. Next, and of course technology comes in, and cycles and jeeps and motorcycles become images that are to be photographed with. If you see early images of Indian Rajas and all that, you find that there's always a book next to a Raja, right? I don't know if you've seen those images. There's always a book, and people are always posing with the book, whether it's women or men, in many of the photographs that come from mainland India. And here you find that there are many people, 1932, 37, 53, 55, either with a jeep or with a cycle. And next image, of course, in 1970s, you have a person with a motorcycle. Okay, so these are next. And then, of course, by the 1950s, you begin to have, independence, 1947, and Nehru has this vision of how do we have a country that is the idea of unity and diversity, and the Republic Day Parade is something that he thinks about fashions in order to bring about the diversity of the region, and to bring about these parades similar to something that is happening in the Soviet Union at this time. And so the tribes from the Northeast have to come to the Republic Day parades and represent their... So all these moments are also interesting moments for Mizos to fashion themselves, who they are, So representing themselves in the Puante, which by now is becoming a standard sort of Mizo design. What we know as Mizo design is emerging by the 1950s. Before that, this was not there. Actually, I have an essay on attire and how these changes in attire takes place. But by the 1950s, Mizos being represented by the bamboo dance. Nowadays, bamboo dance means Mizo, that. And this Puante, this particular attire is something that is is a way in which Mizos are seen to be representing themselves. Okay, next. And of course, in Mizoram also there is, as we say, self-identification, who we are. There are, you get these, the idea of festivals being spaces where people sort of, the collective identity is being reproduced through these kinds of festivals. Okay? So, because Chapsar, Koot and things like that are village level, local festivals, but to be taken on at a state level, where one day there will be these kinds of performances that are taking place. This comes in and we kind of begin to see these kinds of images of self-representation, self-identity, all of that, and producing who you are taking place through festivals. 1962 and 1982 is an image. And then next. Okay, so another sort of set of images that we see very prominent that is coming out in the 1950s is because of all the, I think even in the rest of the Northeast, and I'm sure even in Western India,
Devanand style.
Yeah, Devanand style, but Gregory Peck and all those guys were extremely popular in those days. But in Mizoram, the Second World War, you had a lot of American soldiers also coming into the region, and they bring in the gramophone, the guitar, and all of that. And a particular kind of culture emerges. I mean, Shillong also becomes a very important center for Western music and Western culture. So this fashioning of, I grew up reading Louis L'Amour books, thanks to my brothers, all these cowboy, Sudden and all those J.T. Edson works and things. So I was growing up in the 70s. Okay? So 1950s and 70s, you see this kind of sort of fashioning themselves through the American eyes of vision. Okay, so this is what you get next. And this is sort of, I thought I had another picture of women, but anyway. Oh yeah, okay, that's the one that I wanted to show. Different kinds of, Western bands that are being formed, that's the beginners. Next.
Almost like the Beatles.
Yeah, very much. And of course, this is another thing, the one on the right, it's called, there were a group called Creation Flame, and in the 1970s there was a music festival in Nagaland, and some of the Mizos were performing there in Nagaland in 1976, and you see that some of them are wearing owl shawls there. So, and so Rasam, some of you may remember, she's called the Nightingale of Mizoram, a very well-known singer. So, taking on to Western music during during this period. Okay, next. And how attire changes from in the 1940s and 50s. Okay, next. Yeah, another image of the puan is also the puan that is. I think some of you call it mekhla here, the skirts that you wear. They're self-fashioning that is taking place. So these designs are things that are being produced and developed even as early as that. An image from the 1970s, very sort of modern women many of them came to study in Dibrugarh, in Guwahati, Shillong, Calcutta. All these were places where Mizos flooded for higher education. And all that meeting together brought about this kind of modernized energy. Okay. Next. Okay. And we know that in the 1960s, 1966, the insurgency broke out, and there was under the Mizo National Front, and the accord was signed in 1986. So throughout the 20 years, there was the MNF, which was underground. But even in the immediate, unfortunately, we do not have too many images of the troubles. I've managed to get a few of them, which I will show. But one of the things is that the pictures that come from the underground are very interesting pictures of people, of the life that the underground lived. Okay, so these are some of the images that come from the underground. And even over there, there is a westernization, like thinking of themselves as cowboys. at heart, and I think in denim and the other person seems like a 1970s Hindi movie, right? Or even a Western movie. But even if during the underground years, people were fashioning themselves. Okay, next. Oops, one more.
Somebody has to press.
Okay, that's the more pictures. Sorry. Can you just go up? I thought I had one more image that I couldn't see. Maybe. Okay, yeah, that's a one. 14. So these are some of the few images that I have of the truck. Okay, yeah, just one. The next one, huh? So very, very few images of what was happening on the ground during the Troubles. And this 1966 image is the image of when the Indian government sort of bombed Aizawl town, and it was actually taken by a missionary. And there are only 2 images that I could find of that time. Okay, so this is one of them. And 1967, you may have heard of the grouping of villages, which is something that the Indian government did, which is that, during the Troubles, what happened was that many people were not when it initially broke out, many people did not support the Mizo National Front. But then the government carried out this extremely repressive policy of grouping of villages, which is that 6 or 7 villages would be grouped together into one village. And each village is associated with land that you cultivate. Okay? So when you group together villages, many people had to walk miles to their village lands in order to be able to cultivate. And then of course all the villages were burned down, the ones that they left behind. So that caused a lot of anti-government sentiment. And one of these images that you see on the top, 1967, is a group of people dismantling their church so that they will take the material and go to the other village. Okay, so that is one. And of course the one below is an image of a grouped village. And you can see those little shacks at the back. Everybody was kind of pushed together in a tiny settlement in order to to form one village. So one of the, you may have seen Aizawl today all stacked up together. Of course, there's been a lot of population explosion since the 1980s, ever since the war. But a lot of people came into Aizawl during the Troubles because they were afraid of being in the villages. The villages, you had the oppression of the MNF as well as the government, whereas in Aizawl they felt safer. So that's why Aizawl today is extremely crowded. And that is a result of the Troubles. Okay? So anyway, at the end of the day, I think I'll stop here. I've taken more than my due time. I hope it wasn't too boring today.
That was amazing. Big hand, please.
Yeah. One of the things that I wanted to say is that when you look at visual sources, I think everything comes to life in a certain way, right? And I guess that's one of the reasons we all look at Instagram more than textbooks now. This materiality of history, I think, is something that we try to sort of bring out through this book. So thank you very much for patiently listening.
Thank you so much. That was actually kind of a masterful visual history of Mizoram told through photographs, amazing photos from the archive. And so contrary to the stories you might imagine or think is the journey of these people. It's very interesting. In a way, we're turning now. When we started talking about photography, one of the cliches in a way is that photography in India has been a colonial project. It's a projection. It's a making of the state. I'm very happy to end in a way with Thomas, who's done amazing work, and he'll tell you more about it. But a lot of his work has to do with also a kind of a construction of a state footprint of what India represents. And please tell us more about it, Thomas.
Thank you, Vivek. Let me start by saying that I'm extraordinarily pleased to be in this most beautiful town. I never expected this place to be so beautiful, and the people better than the beauty the nature is giving. Now, Vivek tried to steal the thunder saying that 2,000, about 1,000 kilometers, Vietnam is closer than his state. That means, but then he didn't say that I'm from Kerala. So my state is much further than his state is from this place by maybe about 300, 400 kilometers. So that I'm taking the credit away from him. I hope you will not mind.
Exactly.
Now, you had a lot of serious talk over here. Pictures representing transformation of history. I think Joy brought that out so beautifully, and I can tell you, if anybody could have done it better. Before we talk about photography, this is something we need to understand. Photograph, not in the modern days, normally photographs don't tell lies. They depict history. They are the symbols of change. I saw the photograph of that person from France, Nagaland in France. Did you notice the gentleman on the extreme right? He was smoking a pipe. I don't know if you noticed that. So these are all symbols of transformation, and photographs represent changes in history, whether it's for the good or for the bad. You know what, one of the world's most famous photographs, in fact, the most, is the American bombing of Vietnam, and a naked girl fleeing the bombing, the entire body burning. That's probably the photograph of the century. So whether it's Gringo, whether it's Clint Eastwood, whether it's Beatles, they all convey a message of transformation. And transformation is constant. So photographs depict it best, whether for the good or for the bad or for the ugly. Now, as Vivek set the setting, he beautifully set the setting. He gave you how, through the Indian eyes, they took the photographs of Africa and brought back you the reality. In fact, you can describe a photograph in 1,000 or 1,000,000 words, but you're not going to get that impact which will be imprinted in your mind when you see a photograph. So this is the importance of photograph. Photograph will speak 1,000,000 words, as they say. Now, what am I here to tell you? I am trying to talk to you about transformation of ideas through photographs. Okay? Now, I will take you through a different medium, okay, in a sense. I used to work for the President of India, Mr. Pranab Mukherjee. He ordered me to do a book. Now, it looked very different to you. This is the book. It's called The Winged Wonders of Rashtrapati Bhavan. Okay? Now, what has got to do with this? I'll tell you something very interesting. The president normally took a walk in the morning in the gardens, and there's so many migratory birds. And an intellectual giant that he was, he turned out and told me, he said, Mathu, please take the birds' photos. So I thought he's saying it just doesn't matter. I said, yes, sir. So he repeated about 3-4 times. And after 3-4 times, when he was leaving, he says, okay, let me see. I will ask Modi ji to release the book. So I said, again, it just doesn't matter. After about 5 days, he called me and said, Mathu, have you started? I said, so why? Modi ji said he will release a book during the first anniversary of the presidency. I said, what does this mean? So I told him, sir, please, actually I told him, I said, sir, I will die obeying your orders, but tell me, what do I tell the birds? And I said, can you issue an order saying that, okay, you post for me? Can't. So then started a journey. It's quite an interesting journey. I got hold of about, like Vivek says, it's a state project, got hold of about 20, 21 youngsters, gardeners. And every month I used to give them a series of photographs, in photostat, telling them, this month you are likely to see these birds. Okay? So when you're likely to see these birds, what will you do? You will call me, I will be sitting in the office writing the president's speeches. You say, page number 43 has come at so-and-so place. So I used to have a car with camera, so I used to, have you heard about the ghillie suit? Which the snipers have. So I used to wear the ghillie suit, and my chap used to take the camera on tripod, get the shot and come back. So that's how I got this. And the Honorable Prime Minister, when he released it, he took this to a completely different level. Now, I was upset with the president. So he said, Thomas, I know it's difficult, but why I asked you to do this? He says, I need to communicate to the people of the world. And this book, as I'm extraordinarily fortunate that this is there in all the presidential houses in the world. He says, I need to communicate to the people around the world that there need to be a system to protect the birds and the environment of which the birds are a part. So through that he wanted to communicate. And the Honorable Prime Minister, while speaking, took it to a different level altogether. He talked about the migration of birds and a borderless world and a borderless society. That's what it represents. Now, after having shared the serious part, can I have the first slide, please? First one. First one. This is where the Honorable Prime Minister releases this book. And there cannot be greater joy than this. I forgot the pressure the Honorable Prime Minister put on me. Now, there are so many photos in this. I'm going to take you to a lighter side of life, but communicating a meaning. Can I have slide number 2, please? The next slide. Okay. Quickly, don't waste time. Yeah. Enlarge it, please. Now, this is the only photograph in the world of quails in courtship. The black is the male, his eyes blazing red. The spotted is the female, waiting with anticipated expectation and expression. And why? Have you seen the beak? The male picks up a seed, puts it into the mouth of the female and says, Madam, will you be my date tonight? So understand, the male has to bend in the traditional fashion and give the woman the respect. That's what this photo was liked by the Honorable President, and he kept a copy of this in his room, in his private study, to communicate the need for equality in society. See how things change, how beautifully things change. So that is the kind of communication level that he went to. Now, let me go to the next slide. Now, what's this? It's a very interesting photograph. It's called the flameback. A thing called the flameback. Flameback is a woodpecker. And the woodpecker's beak is not suited to drink water. But in summer, the president said, have places where they can drink water everywhere to protect them. So, the woodpecker drinks water, but when he brings the beak together, the water will spurt out. Okay? Now, I'm going to show you another photograph to communicate another meaning. While he was drinking water, a bee, next photograph is, a bee says, hey, that looks like flour to me. Let me go get some honey. Alright? So which means, don't see what you believe. Alright? So he comes straight at this poor woodpecker. Straight onto him. And then, let's go to the next. Poor guy got stung. And he goes away. So what's the lesson? If you sit with the Honorable President, absolute brilliant mind, he will spin stories out of this. So photograph is a medium of change is what he always focused. Since we don't have much time, there is another book which I did called Abode Under the Dome. And the President said, you need to focus on British rule in India and to show how they enjoyed in opulence and rivalry at the cost of India, which was poor. Okay, can I go to the next slide, please? Okay, this is again the food chain. This is a shikra catching a rat. I know some of you would find it a little uncomfortable, but that's a shikra bird. In school you study the food chain. So let's go to the next one. And this is a female quail at her best. All right? And this is like, this is like the modern, catwalk that she's doing for you. All right, let's go for the next one, please. All right. Now, this is a very interesting photograph. Okay? Now, after this wildlife, I'll come to something serious about history. Now, I got this guy in Masai Mara. Isn't he the most handsomest lion you ever seen? And but yet angry. I'll tell you a story. Okay, I told this to some very, very important people, and they spun a different story out of this. This guy was there early morning in Masai Mara at 5 o'clock. He was sleeping with his girlfriend on the side. Okay? And it is very interesting because I knew the president of Kenya, so he gave me special permission to go early morning. So at 4:30 I was studying, I suddenly saw this, he was almost like an elephant, a huge guy, sleeping with this very petite girlfriend. But the girlfriend's eyes were focused to the east, okay, and this guy's to the west. So the first rays of the sun, she got up, okay, I'm telling you a story, she got up and said, okay, yeah, we need to go to a different place. So she nudged him. And this guy was like a local hero, totally drunk, saying that, I'm going to sleep for some more time. And look at her independence. She nudged, and he didn't wake up. Suddenly he realized that she's gone. And that's the look this guy gives. Angry look. See? It's like, and then the next day I went back to the same place. Okay? And they'd become friends, and I'll show you one of the most beautiful photographs. In fact, National Geographic Award, I said, I'm not giving it to you. Look at this photograph. Isn't it beautiful? Okay, go to the next, and then I'll move to history. Go. And then now I'll move to history. Yes. Okay. This is the only shot which you will get from have you seen photographs of Rashtrapati Bhavan? Yes. This is the only view you will get. There is no other photograph. This is from the dome. Dome of Rashtrapati Bhavan looking into Rajpath. Alright? So if you see at the eye level, this is a part of history. Snapshot, there's this, the Jaipur column as you see, one is the south block, one is the north block, and that's how it looks. And I had to wear harness to climb on the dome to get this photograph. And I thought it's just beautiful. It describes British opulence and symbol of power, like the president says. He says, and he's got this, we have got a museum in Rashtrapati Bhavan. This is one of the photographs. He says, people will understand. One place, famine, in West Bengal, people are dying. This place is opulence. So he wants people to read it. Okay, go to the next one. This photograph is a transformation. This photograph was taken to the Afro-Asian Summit in India. We had about almost all the countries of African heads of states coming in. Now, this is depicting Indian culture at its best, because all transformation with the Indian flag. You have expanded it too much. Just give it a normal expansion. This again, I took this photograph from a crane. Crane which goes up. Otherwise, you won't get it at a high level. You can't get it at a high level. Otherwise, it will be like a perspective, it will be like this. So my son said, Dad, before you go up, please do one thing. Insure yourself for about 5 crores. So if you die, I'll get the money. And something, when you go up, it keeps shaking. And I'll tell you some very interesting fact. The Jaipur column shakes in the wind. It moves by about 5 centimeters. The Jaipur. I'm going to show you something. Okay, go to the next. Now, this is not coming out good. This is the Ashoka Hall. Okay? Now, I'll tell you something very interesting. Again, the president wanted to say that this is the level of opulence in which they lived. And you see the floor below? That's one carpet stitched from Persia. And I'll tell you something very interesting. This floor is sprung. You know what I mean? It's on spring. You know why? Why the Viceroy danced his girlfriend or wife or whoever may be had the bounce in her feet. That's what it was all about. Entire thing on spring. Look at the level of it. You will not get this photograph anyway. And on the left side over here used to be the place for the orchestra to play. Okay? So this is again part of history. This book, and he ensured that this book called Abode Under the Dome, in which we have all these photographs talking about the opulence given to all colonial powers. He gave it to Theresa May, he gave it to the Portuguese president, he gave to the French president, especially this, to make them understand what they did to our nation. And I think that was extraordinarily important. Let's go to the next one. This is again something very interesting. This is, a king of Persia doing his hunting. Okay? This is on the dome. Sorry, this is the top of the Ashoka Hall. And again, this symbolizes history. In fact, these paintings were done by people who were got from Arabia. So you can imagine the kind of, and this has been published by Netcolor Future. I've got a series of photographs of this.
Is it Nadir Shah, sir?
Is it?
Nadir Shah.
That's correct. You're a great guy, yeah? I didn't want to go into the details, so he's going for hunting. You guys, you can see, if you can expand it, you can see. Okay, let's go to the next. I think that's the... Okay, then go back. I just wanted to show you a photograph where this is supposed to be the banquet hall. You guys, I don't know if you ever get a chance. This is where, this is where the Britishers used to give banquets, when important people. And this is where the Indian president gave banquets to foreign dignitaries. And you will see Mahatma Gandhi occupying the center place, showing that he's the person who brought you freedom. And this has been placed well. And if you see, just come down. Here you have, these are actually hidden speakers here. And we play nice patriotic songs before the heads of states arrive. So these are photographs I thought you will never, probably not see unless you see the book or you have not seen the place. That's it. I covered a whole gamut of topics, threw in a lot of ideas because people were talking serious stuff. I thought, let's say it through pictures in a different way. And that's it. That's what I did. Thanks.
Thank you. That's actually extremely serious stuff right there, right? We're seeing the, one of the things I wanted to ask you about, we're going to take some questions. We're actually out of time, but we will take some questions. I wanted to, one of the things that became apparent to me, particularly in this part of the world, you talked about it, when you have the person asking someone to take their clothes off in order to take a photograph. This exotification is, which is of course an orientalization, if you like, is such an issue in India in general, particularly an issue in the northeast of India, I find, where, including in tourism now, there's a kind of a self-orientalization that's taking place constantly. I think it's very important for us to understand these processes. To some extent, I believe in agency. You're welcome to do what you want to do yourself and with your culture. But I do think it's quite often problematic when, particularly the state of Assam sometimes, certainly the center, portrays an image of this part of India that very often is uncomfortable. Recently a movie was produced about the rockers of Nagaland, which A.R. Rahman has produced, and it was put out at the International Film Festival of India when that was the debut, which I'm part of. Strong objections, including people like from abroad who are Naga scholars, wrote into me and to other people saying, what is going on here? Why are we being orientalized in this way? It ignores the story. Can I ask that question to both of you quickly? When you see the state creating an image like that, how do you feel about what's happening here in this part of the world, both to each of you? start? You, Kanato?
You want me to?
Yeah, I want to go through this.
Very quickly, Vivek, I think this is a big dilemma for me. I advise, making some policy for tourism in Nagaland. And like, in fact, I wrote a piece, an essay of how tourism has, driven this exoticization. Because at the end of the day, it's about commercialization. That you need to have tourists coming in. And what do tourists come to see in Nagaland? At least for Nagaland, it's the colorful dresses, the natives at their, at their native best. So that's something. It's a big dilemma for us. So it's like driven by, cases of unemployment. So we need to generate, employment. And of course, for Nagaland, it's just what we have to market is culture. And what is culture? We have to go back to our past, So, this is a very, very difficult question for me. In fact, I wrote an essay which I could not really negotiate. But of course, for a person like me, who maybe is a little bit practical and looking into the social realities of how we actually need to, create more revenues and create jobs for the young people. I'm like, okay, as you say, agency, let people do whatever they like. But at the same time, one thing that we are also being very careful about is about the misrepresentation. Like if you see, I was very shocked to see Priyanka Chopra in a totally, which in a kind of a Naga costume, which is supposed to be worn exclusively, not a coward, useless person like me. Useless by a warrior, somebody who has taken that. Very, very symbolic. She's putting that. So, how do we actually negotiate these things about what we call as, very, very controversial issue of cultural appropriation, But yes, very quickly, it's like either, what we call as between a rock and a hard place. So, driven by tourism, and my students know, when I give them talk about how do we promote tourism, and I say, culture is something we have to explore and commercialize. But at the same time, it's also about representation. As you say, the orientalization, about misrepresentation, about self-exoticization, which also is very, very problematic. So this is something that I think Nagas are struggling with. We have no black and white answer. I think this is something entirely left to the people of the state to decide for themselves. Thank you.
I think it's a uniquely Naga problem.
I don't think so.
Just kidding, that's on the lighter side. To a certain, taking the measures into consideration, I've written in my book also that, and I was telling KANATO earlier as well, that Mizo identity making is very self-referential. And it's inward looking, So most of, at least from within Mizoram, the representation is for the Mizos. It's not for an outsider. Okay, so in that self-representation, there might be problems with that self-representation, no doubt about it. But it's not necessarily for an outsider. So I don't know how one would, I don't have any proper yes or no kind of answer to it. There are, like I said, 12th century, they show the traditional dress as belonging to the 12th century in pristine, clean, new condition, and they say this is from the 12th century. There are lots of problems with that kind of thing. But it's not kind of for an outside gallery, it's not for outsider. So it's a little different from the way Nagas represent themselves, which I think through the Hornbill Festival, which is a festival that is calling not only Indians but also many essentially Western sort of crowds, so that it goes on in different directions. But on the other hand, I also feel that sometimes I think our people were also too sensitive. Like for instance, I don't know whether you have seen this series, PACHUAU, season 2. I enjoyed watching it, I really liked it, but there are lots of criticisms about the thing, saying that, they're representing, drugs, violence, and all of that has been from this particular. Now the thing is, if you're going to make an issue out of everything, if they had represented Mizos like that, who knows, I have a problem. But
I enjoy it. 2 reasons for me.
I'm just saying that I may be biased that way, and that might be how I'm thinking, I don't know. But sometimes I also feel that, otherwise how do we represent? Are we going to represent ourselves as all always happy all the time, no issues, no problems. You know, there is a problem of drugs, there is a problem of violence, no doubt about that. So just because it's done perhaps by an outsider, we're getting angry about it. How is it? You know. So I mean, like Kanato said, I find it different. I mean, the movie by itself is done quite well. It's just very well produced, okay? And even in terms of the language and the acting, everything is done very, very well. So one doesn't really have too many issues with that. But in terms of the representation, I don't think there is any particular problem, at least from my side.
I'm going to stand to take questions. You know, the Goans are the people who are depicted as happy all the time, right? And cliche, every possible negative cliche that you would like. You know, guys are drunk the whole time, the women are super friendly, to put it mildly. They're kind of like, you know, mongrelized Indians, and this is the projection continually on us, which is quite complicated. But the point is it for consumption or not? In a way, Mizoram is lucky in that you're not producing images for consumption. Whereas in the case of Goa, which received 6 million tourists last year for a state that has 1.5 million population, and places like Nagaland, which look eagerly to tourism,
Yes.
because you have Nagaland's incredibly culturally rich. These problems, you know, the visual representation is so important, and there should be guidelines, but unfortunately they are. Let's take some questions quickly. 1, 2, 3. Let's start with the gentleman back there. Please introduce yourself.
Okay, my name is Adam.
Adam.
Yeah, I research scholar for the Dibrugarh University Center for Management Science.
Mike.
Okay, thank you. Basically, I have two questions, and one of them goes to the mom in the table, and the second question goes to Sir Thomas. Sir Matthew, right? Thank you. So I heard from mom's presentation in the preliminary. She said that the Nagaland is seen as the visual representative of Northeast. I just want to fulfill my curiosity by understanding what you mean by Nagaland being the visual representative of Northeast. And then, for the second question, please, I want to know if we visualize what the Britishers did, and then we see it as an opulence. They were living in an opulence lifestyle, like you said in your presentation. Can we say today the current leadership of the political group across all the countries that the Britishers were ruling, are they sending a message to the citizens that, am I correct?
Are they?
Are they
I
sending
like
a
that.
message?
Excellent question.
Thank you.
So, Joy, you first, no?
The first question is already done.
Okay, you go ahead.
Okay. No, let me finish. So, are they sending a message to the citizenry about this kind of opulence lifestyle that the Britishers were living, that they are doing away with that kind of style, or they are rather increasing it to the suffering of the masses? Thank you.
See, I don't know, I don't want to comment about, I don't want to comment about other nations, but as far as India is concerned, I think whether it's the Rashtrapati Bhavan, the president uses the small part of Rashtrapati Bhavan and not the part where the viceroy stayed. Now, half the, excess land, no, I won't say half, has been transformed into a school, that is Dr. Rajendra Prasad School. And we have daycare centers and several other socially beneficial schemes are being run from there, actually, even today. In fact, at one point of time, I had the privilege of staying in the house built by Lutons for the private secretary to the viceroy. The entire length of the building was about 140 meters and about 16 acres of lawn I had. So in jest, I told the president, I said, "So why don't you stay in my house? Let me shift to your place." Very small bedroom, very small entertainment room. So as far as India is concerned, even in the state, India is a democracy. People will not tolerate that kind of opulence which you. I'll tell you a very interesting joke. Opulence which other countries would tolerate. Obama had come. I was his escort officer and a great speaker, great lawyer. So while I was escorting him to at-home function in the evening, he looked at it and said, "Thomas, your presidential house is so huge." That is, he's talking about Australia. So I told him, "Sir, can I take an aside? A joke, can I, give you a riposte?" So he says, "A law." He said, "Thomas, go ahead." I said, "Sir, I've seen 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. That's where the White House is." I said, "Sir, your White House looks like my president's outhouse," I said. So I said, "You got me there." But I said, "Sir, I just want to tell you, but 90% is not being utilized by him. We have a library, we have a museum, we allow students to go out from all over the country now. We have for them to come and appreciate talking history." So I don't think that is, there is a problem in some less advanced countries of the world, I'm not taking names, where there are too many symbols of power and influence. But in India, I don't think that kind of symbolism is there.
I remember, I think Obama commented on your book.
Yes, Obama even commented. I'll tell you a joke. There's a great photo of Obama, Michelle, a charming couple. So when the president handed over the photo, Obama's a charmer in the talk. He said, "Thomas, I never expected officers to have such talents and you could spend so much time doing such beautiful books." I said, "Sir, I'm still available for hire," I told him. "You can hire me." So he said, "I will go back to the White House and see if there's an opportunity for you." Then I said, "Sir, what are you saying? You're very poor paymasters in any case." So Michelle said, "He's got you."
You had a question? Mike. Oh yes, sorry. Joy is not answering.
Yeah, so I mean, it's my statement was a very broad, generalized statement. But if there is any sort of depiction of the Northeast in, say, in Delhi, in festivals and things like that, usually it's the Nagas who are depicted when the face of the Northeast generally has been, I'm not sure if this is changing now, but has generally been images of different kind of Naga tribes. In fact, I just forget his name, but there's a friend who has done, say for instance, a stamp, stamp collections on the Northeast, and the most number of people who have been represented are the Nagas, even on Indian postal stamps. Okay? So things like that, I think, are things that I was referring to when I said that statement.
I wanted to add something. I don't think we need to worry so much about it, unless it insults the tradition or a religious sentiment.
It's also for those people to decide.
I agree. That's why I said unless it does from their perspective. Like for instance, former distinguished IAS officer from this card, Pyarila. In our state, whenever you are represented, you have a Keralite with half-naked guy with lungi turned down and doing a boat ride, okay, or doing that boat race. It's okay. You go to the Red Indians, Apache places in the US, they are also dressed like the old traditional. So unless I agree, that is the state has to decide. The people will have to decide if it offends their sensibilities. Yes. Otherwise, yes, I think we should let it be.
Question.
Hi. Can you guys hear me? Yeah. So my name is Ozu Barua, and so my question is to all three of the speakers. So I've seen like the Northeast have gradually made their name in the whole of India, like you can say through sports or even through music especially, and now as you said through different series and shows and movies, through films. So even my father was involved in the PACHUAU. He was playing Uncle Ken,
Oh yeah,
Mr. Dibrugarh,
well appreciated.
So yeah, so he was so. I believe that like few films which were earlier there, like the film about Mary Kom, I believe we could have taken more local actors to portray the characters, which would have made it more natural. And coming to the sports part, because I have spent a lot of time playing sports myself, I believe Nagaland had a very great football player named PACHUAU earlier, and even today an award is given on his name. So I believe that sports can really help, but do you think privatization of sports in music festivals will help in future? Because currently in India the sports, especially football, is taken over by the Reliance company, and I'm not sure if the private company can take it till a longer time.
I know very little about sports, and so I can't comment on that. But I must say that in terms of representation, in my book Being Mizo, I've mentioned it about how this development of this representation. And if there was a movie that came out in the 70s called Ye Gulistan Hamara, if you see. So, and it's about, he's an engineer, and the place is not mentioned, but I'm assuming it's either one of the Arunachali Naga tribes or Naga tribes. It's not really mentioned. And how, that movie was an interesting movie because I felt that it was the way the state was managing the Northeast at that point of time. So here is Devanand, an engineer. He comes into this village, they're trying to build a bridge. The people resist. Devanand, I think, falls in love with one of the girls, something of that sort. Okay, was it Shravya? Okay, I can't quite remember. Yeah, so from that time onwards to PACHUAU, it's come a long way, and I think things are improving, and that's because there's a lot of local representation within the thing. So I think that's what I have to say with regard to your question. About the sports, I have no clue.
Yeah. I have a bunch of answers for you, but we'll talk at another time. So we have two more. Let's take both questions. Do we have any more questions? Any other questions? You have one. Okay, so let's hear all three questions in one go. Yeah, let's hear all three questions and then we'll address in one round robin. Okay, please. Introduce yourself, sir.
My name is Pavan Kumar. I serve Government of Assam. Even after 1961, Operation Vijay, annexation of Goa, there was an agreement between Salazar and Swaran Singh, which allowed Portuguese laws to continue in Goa. For example, a Goan citizen could get married under Portuguese civil code.
Sure.
And then Portuguese mining concessions given to Timlos, then they all continued. And then food traditions.
I did not expect this question already.
So, chicken kafriya or bibinka.
Sure.
So, a lot of, and then people putting penny in field cars when fuel runs out to run a car is quite common. So, whether all this, the influence of Portuguese culture on present-day Goan life, is it captured by anyone in lens like visual history? Like
Yeah, so it's Goa's continually, I'll answer this before we move on to back to the Northeast. Goa is continually in the popular imagination. I write for all of the national publications. I'm kind of lucky. In the past, other people would write about Goa. I'm able to write about Goa. So we have a series of movies continually coming. This thing about Portugal, like here also Britain, I think we get a little bit, it's a misconception. What basically happened is it's the opening of globalization. Portugal opened a door. And then by the 16th century, the largest most richest trading port in the world actually was in Little Goa, right? And the whole world came there. And so its influence there's profound influence of Southeast Asia, there's a profound influence of Brazil, profound influence of Africa. If you look at our foods, as I was mentioning, or architecture, all of these things are very much present, right? So to kind of say Portugal is wrong. These are people who you can be Indian and dress in Western clothes and maybe speak Portuguese and Konkani and worship in a church and listen to rock music, but that can also be Indian, right? This is part of the thing. You get to choose. Nobody gets to decide for me what I choose. That is the what is the point of having a democratic state if not, right? So I think for all of us, this idea of bending over backwards to fit someone else's idea of who you are is a very harmful thing. And I'm happy to see in a place like Dibrugarh that instinct is a lot less than it is in other parts of the world, right? And currently, of course, we are seeing it as the worst case scenario in the United States of America, where the white power has come back, Nazism has come back, Elon Musk did a Nazi salute. So they are drawing the walls. Not only do they think that the age of colonialism is not over. Yesterday, Trump said he wants to take over Gaza. So colonialism is back, you know, and this is a bad sign for all of us and everywhere. But what's happening here is the ultimate riposte to that, right? We are not living the way they want us to live, thinking the ideas they want us to think. We are thinking our own ideas. So this is a very important thing. This is why festivals like this are important. This is why the Northeast is so important to all of us. I am much happier to be Indian with Northeast being a big part of it. Like my idea of India as Northeast is equal to Goa, you know, and why should it not be like that? Why should my idea be dictated, if you don't like mine, sir, by Rashtrapati Bhavan? You know, like to me, Rashtrapati Bhavan is not an indication of how I want to be Indian, right? My idea of India includes many other things. I like Dibrugarh University a lot, makes me feel comfortable here. Let's take questions from the two remaining people and then we'll move on.
I'm Kostum that I teach in the university here. Thank you for the presentation. I have something specifically to KANATO and Joy. While listening to you, I was actually thinking, what do you think of this proliferation of a lot of new digital spaces that is coming up? Because a lot of this, be it Instagram or be it other forums, it has actually taken photography to a different level. And I come especially from the point of view of, say, giving access as well as anonymity. Because we talk a lot about the outsider's gaze or the outward gaze, but there is also an internal gaze in our societies, as you know. Right? There is some kind of a control, there is this normativity is kind of watched all the time. So I can see there are a lot of radical spaces opening up. There are type of pages where a lot of people feel free to post. I mean, right here I cannot help but remember a friend of ours who passed away recently, Tarun Bhartia.
Thank you.
He really used digital forums at a very powerful level to bridge this gap between art and activism, and he was very powerful. A lot of good books on Northeast specifically used to have his photograph as a cover. So those type of very interesting, innovative kind of spaces that are opening up. How do you see that phenomenon? That's what I wanted to know.
Wonderful. Let's take the other question, but I really want to thank you. I should have brought up Tarun Bhartia at the beginning. We lost a major photographer who's created one of the great herbs in India. I mean, as great as Sunil Jana or something like that, and it represents the Northeast the way the Northeast represents itself, which makes it a very powerful herb. Your question, please, and that will be the last one for today.
Good evening. Good afternoon. I'm Dibrugarh, a student of computer science and engineering. So my question is very generic. So my question
Very
is
what?
Nowadays we see videos are more popular in mainstream media. Even Instagram, which was a photo-sharing platform, now trying hard to be like TikTok. So in that context, what will be the future of photograph? Will it remain as something with epic history, or is it possible that videos will replace photograph?
Okay, two sets of questions. What do you start with, Thomas?
I think got me wrong. I said Rashtrapati Bhavan represents the will of the people. That's all right. Number two, photographs. What's a video? Video is photograph in motion. So will they replace entirely? They will not. Will they add to it? Yes, they will. But what are we scared about? See, according to me, the digital media gives access to people even in the remotest part of the world and our country. I think that's a thing we need to celebrate about. It gives representation to people. It gives linkages to people to areas where there were no linkages. So these are all positive outcomes, and most importantly, you need to realize they are inevitable outcomes of modernization and technological development society. So I don't think we need to fear, but there needs to be regulation around.
how to respond to Kaspar's question, but I find that I mean the little that I know about Instagram pages and people sort of representing themselves in Instagram pages. Two things. One is, I mean, I grew up in a culture where showing off was something that was looked down upon. And I find that Instagram is a very important space where people actually now legitimize showing off. I don't know whether I look at it like that. I mean, so there is that sort of aspect to it that we need to consider. But also, I think it's also a space where people are engaging with modernity and the global context in a way that was never done before. Like, for instance, this pouting image that we often see when people take selfies or whatever, right? I mean, you go to rural Mizoram or any place in India, you'll find people are pouting and they're taking pictures.
Any place in the world.
Any place in the world,
It's
exactly.
okay.
So, the question is not about it's okay or not. We're not saying that something is right or wrong, but we're talking about the impact of certain things, right? And this is not about right or wrong. I'm not moralizing on that front at all. So I'm just saying that this is an impact and the kind of poses that you have, and of course we know a lot of deaths because of these selfies that people are taking. I mean, I guess in the most number of deaths through taking selfies is from India, in the world. So I think, I mean, that's the only thing that I can talk about in terms of these new sort of spaces that things like Instagram and all that. The other thing in response to the other question is also that I was it's just a random thought, but the other day, all my photographs, I lost, most of my photographs are from my phone because my phone just died on me, and there were only a few photographs that were backed up and the rest I lost, So sometimes we think that these digital images, unlike paper images, will last forever. But actually we have to remember that a lot of these digital images are going to get lost. In fact, there's a higher rate of loss. Even though we're taking more images now, there is actually a higher rate of loss and a higher rate of photographs not being seen as a result of that also. So, like for instance, photographs, my parents always used to say that, at least in those good old days when we had paper photographs, we would see them because we'd see the product. But now people take photographs and they don't even send it, and we don't even get to see them anymore, Only the person who's taking the photograph and maybe a few people, and especially the older generation who don't have access to that kind of thing, will not be able to see the photographs. So I think there are new equations that are emerging, and digital photographs don't necessarily mean that they're going to last forever, or they're being more widely circulated and seen either. Okay, so that's just my sort of summary, sort of observation on the...
Quickly, 2 minutes, okay? Yeah, so I just recently... Alright, okay. During the vacation, I was in fact in a Baptist pastors conference. So more than about 400 pastors attended from different villages. And my topic was how to use digital space sensibly. So my talk was that go back to the churches, teach the people how to use sensibly. Because, the case of at least Arunachal, Nagaland, Mizoram, suddenly there's kind of a quantum leap when it comes to, this, our engagement in the digital space. So I think that comes with a lot of caveat of how people are actually misusing that. The other thing, at least for Nagaland, where this question of cultural preservation, question of retaining our culture is becoming quite a debate, is that it's providing a very good platform. Say for instance, there's a debate among Naga, these artists and then, creators to say that, see, for instance, you're my brother-in-law, so just imagine a Naga Baptist having a tattoo. He'll be chased out from the church. Or for instance, we have a memory of where, a young Naga boy having tattoos beaten up by the Indian army. We have gone through this kind of phases. So I think the question is that nobody would want to have their skin etched using that. So I think so digital space has become a very important place, rather a very viable space to retain, to preserve, to maybe from the body to the digital space. So I think that's a lot of good things are also happening. So I think, yeah, definitely a lot of things comes with a lot of caveat and then precautions, but at the same time, at least for Nagaland, I think digital space is providing a platform for people to engage more, to be more creative, and at least to preserve our culture. And then, for instance, like my parents used to sit with me and tell me folktales. At least if I get married, I'm going to be very busy, so I don't think I would have the time to tell stories to my children. But I think at least my brother, who is an animator, they're trying to recreate stories of the digital spaces and all. So I think, yes, definitely, I think very exciting times, and I'm sure the digital space will really, really transform not only my state, but the notice region as a whole. Thank you.
Okay, since I'm the moderator, last word for me. Quick note on Goa and then on the Northeast. One thing is that one thing that you know now is that Goa has been open to the world for a very long time, a lot earlier than this part of the world, right? But what I always tell, I deal a lot with writers, artists, I mentor a number of them, I edit stuff, we have a very successful creative sphere. And what I often talk to, we have brilliant young artists coming up just like you. What I always talk about is culture, our culture is not a trap. It is a springboard.
Exactly.
Right? And to preserve this idea of preservation, I see it quite often happening problematically in the Northeast, where you're preserving things uncritically. Things that were invented 75 years ago have suddenly become, things that have to be preserved at all costs.
Yes.
Otherwise, we are losing our culture. I think that is when culture becomes a prison. It's not supposed to be that, right? Culture is something that animates us. That's a deep wellspring for our creativity. I think that's what I find most interesting. So I've returned many times to the Northeast to write about the Northeast for exactly the kind of publications which are problematic in a way. I've come many times for GQ, I've come many times for Condé Nast Traveler. When the new glitzy magazines came to India with a global view and they wanted to write about the Northeast, oddly, or perhaps less oddly now that you know me a little bit, they keep sending me, right? So I've written about Nagaland, I urge you to look at it in a totally non-exotic, that's zero exotification. I treat Nagaland like I treat Brooklyn, which brings me to my point, which relates to his question, is that to me, we've used this word modernity a lot. Nehru spoke about our tryst with destiny in 1947. I think for all of us, I was very happy to see KANATO has borrowed my phrase already. He was talking about tryst with modernity, right? And that tryst with modernity, I'm claiming that's my phrase, by the way. But the tryst with modernity is endlessly beautiful and fascinating here in this region. And that's what I find so attractive about it. I find this tremendous creation of music, art, food, ways of living, ways of being in the world, ways of belonging.
Exactly.
Is absolutely brilliant from this part of the world. So the digital sphere that he's talking about, I'm not on Instagram. I have a treaty with my children that they will get Instagram and I will stay off it. But I know that in the Northeast, Instagram is the best way to navigate your way around. Probably there are people here whose artworks and self-expression would be of great interest to us if we turned it around. It would be really interesting to look at their Instagram feeds, to see this kind of representation. So I think that I feel a tremendous amount of excitement about the new visuals, because for the first time, this happened with us maybe 200 years ago, 300 years ago. For the first time, these kind of very modern means are being completely adopted by people from here to represent themselves and create their own world and their own relationships. So that's the power of the image, okay? Thank you very much. You've been an excellent audience. We stayed for a full 2 hours.